After suffering through countless romantic failures, this guy ended up creating an imaginary friend just to get relationship advice. And the answer he came up with was simple. Start looking at every girl as if she were nothing more than a rock. Back when Parker was still a kid, he got rejected over 20 times, and every girl came up with a different excuse. After carrying around all that emotional damage, he created a companion for himself, an imaginary friend named Jason. Jason started teaching him how to avoid getting his heart broken again. The most important rule was to treat every girl as though she were a stone. And after spending years drilling that mindset into his head, he genuinely began seeing every girl as a different kind of rock. But there was one absolute rule: never get your hopes up just because a girl smiled at him or acted kindly. Thanks to that, Parker finally learned how to talk to girls naturally without turning every small interaction into a full-blown romance in his imagination. However, after 5 years of living that way and seeing every girl as a rock, he finally crossed paths with a beautiful young woman. The big guy completely froze and ended up blurting out that she was incredibly beautiful. And you can already guess that he landed himself in serious trouble because of it, right? From that moment on, Parker's life is about to change completely. This story is seriously amazing, guys. So make sure to leave a like and a comment so we can bring you the next part. It's really important that you leave a comment and share this video as much as possible. If it gets enough views, I'll bring the second part as soon as I can. Without wasting any more time, let's jump straight into the story. The story begins with Parker being greeted by a girl while he looked at her as if she were a rock. It didn't matter how many girls he encountered on the street or at school, he always viewed them exactly the same way. Back in elementary school, he was rejected more than 20 times, and every rejection happened differently. And naturally, all of that left some deep scars on our boy Parker. He lost faith in himself and no longer wanted anything to do with girls. That was when he created an imaginary friend, the little guy known as Jason, and his tiny companion told him that he should simply think of girls as rocks. That way he would never end up traumatized again. From that point forward, Parker spent a lot of time meditating and practicing mental discipline. He repeated that belief for years until he finally succeeded in seeing every girl as a rock. Jason also gave him another special piece of advice. He wasn't allowed to fall for girls, even if they approached him with the sweetest smile imaginable. According to Jason, girls often gave boys false hope, so he refused to fall under what he called feminine hypnosis. Yeah, this guy had maxed out his distrust skill tree. One girl wanted to ask for help with her studies, but he simply turned around and told her he had no interest in helping. This dude was the definition of a textbook Sigma, guys. He knew he was popular with girls because they were constantly approaching him. But he felt absolutely no attraction toward them, mainly because he literally viewed every single woman as nothing more than a rock. At that moment, he called for Jason, and we discovered that his imaginary friend had grown up, maybe a little too much. Jason was worried that Parker would go through all of high school without ever meeting a girl or getting a girlfriend. But our protagonist explained that he had already given up on the idea of dating and even asked Jason if he had forgotten about that decision. He didn't care if people called him weird or a loser. While walking, Parker accidentally dropped his phone. A girl called out to him and held out her hand, telling him that he had dropped it. She tucked her hair behind her ear, and when he looked at her, he realized she looked nothing like a rock. The big guy stood there staring at her, trying to process what was happening. Wait, I'm not seeing her as a rock. And on top of that, she's the most beautiful girl I've ever seen in my entire life. That was a huge problem because it had been an incredibly long time since he had actually seen a real girl. For years, girls had basically been two-dimensional objects in his eyes. It's been 5 years since I've seen a real female face. The girl asked why he wasn't saying anything and why he kept staring at her. He was sweating so much that it looked like he might melt on the spot. And then he suddenly blurted out, "My God, you're incredibly beautiful." Oh wait, what did I just say? After hearing that, the girl became completely flustered. She thanked him, and he awkwardly took the phone from her hands. He apologized and immediately ran away as if his survival depended on it. The kind of speed you'd expect from a protagonist fleeing his own feelings. Completely confused, the girl stood there wondering what had just happened. Meanwhile, Parker was running faster than ever before. He looked like a professional marathon runner as he wondered why on earth he had directly told her she was beautiful. It happened because my brain completely shut down in front of her. After all, it's been 5 years since I've seen a girl that pretty. Later, he finally made it home. Jason told him that his reaction had actually been pretty cute, but Parker insisted that his life was completely over. Even so, Jason told him not to be so discouraged. How am I supposed not to be depressed? I literally told that girl she was beautiful. Why couldn't I see her as a rock? The mustached man asked our protagonist what he planned to do from now on. Terrified, our protagonist said that the mysterious girl would probably go around telling everyone that he had called her beautiful. Then he remembered all the painful moments from his past, when he confessed to girls only for them to reject him and tell him how unpleasant he was. Jason understood better than anyone just how deeply all of that had scarred Parker. And when he looked at his friend, he found him completely defeated, curled up into himself like a cocoon. So Jason walked over and smacked him hard on the head. "Get moving already, kid. Lift your head up. You need to come up with a plan. Since you can't see her as a rock, then you need to make sure you never run into that girl again." Thinking about it carefully, that actually made sense since they weren't even in the same class, so all he had to do was avoid her. Because of that, he ended up agreeing with Jason and admitted that his imaginary friend had some pretty solid ideas. The next day, he arrived at school extra early, and the moment he got there, he came face to face with that mysterious girl. She asked whether he happened to remember her. "My God, I ran into her again." At that moment, he recalled Jason's advice from the previous day when he had told him to just act naturally if they met again. A girl nearby asked who the guy with glasses was, while the mysterious girl let out a small laugh. She then told the friend standing beside her that he was the boy who had called her beautiful the previous afternoon. Right then, Parker became convinced that the mysterious girl had told everyone about the compliment. With a serious expression, he started wondering whether she was making fun of him. Wearing the sweetest smile imaginable, the mysterious girl asked if she looked beautiful that day too, just like she had the day before, clearly hoping for another compliment. But our big guy was completely frozen with fear, desperately wishing she would simply leave him alone. Then, out of absolutely nowhere, Parker suddenly bolted away in panic. Emergency exit unlocked. Jason even commented that this unexpected retreat had been an excellent tactical decision. And Parker was completely irritated, convinced that she had been laughing at him the whole time. But maybe she was laughing because she liked him. Hold on there, Parker. Don't start building castles in the sky. Meanwhile, the girl remained standing there, completely clueless about what had just happened. He made it outside the building and realized that the mysterious girl was still there. She stood out from everyone else, and at that moment she turned around and waved goodbye to him. But he tried avoiding her once again by taking a different route. No matter where Parker went, he somehow kept running into the mysterious girl. The entire week passed with them crossing paths, and every single time she ended up being completely ignored. By the end of the week, he returned home exhausted after spending all those days running away from her. He even told Jason that the whole situation felt incredibly strange. He couldn't see her as a rock the way he saw every other girl. At that moment, she suddenly appeared looking rather annoyed and called out to him. The shock hit him so hard that he almost felt his heart leap out of his chest. He had successfully avoided her all week long, but now she had finally cornered him. She asked him why he kept running away from her, and she added that it was frustrating having to call out to him repeatedly, only for him to ignore her every single time. Then the girl asked whether she had done something wrong to make him act that way. She even pointed out that he was behaving very strangely. Not wanting her to think badly of him, the big guy told himself that he needed to think fast and come up with a good explanation. So he began stammering while trying to explain why he had been avoiding her. The real reason, as we already know, was that she was the only girl he couldn't see as a rock. Eventually, he chose complete honesty and confessed that he viewed all girls as rocks, except for her. Naturally, she found that pretty bizarre. Should I have just lied to her? Even Jason, his imaginary friend, thought poor Parker was being a complete idiot. The girl lowered her gaze and noticed that his hands were trembling uncontrollably. He looked unbelievably nervous standing there in front of her. But then the girl simply gave him an incredibly gentle smile. She asked for his name, and he told her that he was Parker. Leaning a little closer, the girl said she wanted to tell him a secret. Actually, Parker, what you just did is considered flirting. When she whispered those words directly into his ear, the poor guy froze completely like a statue. Critical emotional damage. He was not built for that combo. Back when he was a child, he had asked his imaginary friend for advice. The first piece of advice was to treat every girl as though she were a rock. But that strategy had failed spectacularly when it came to this mysterious girl. And the second piece of advice was to never create romantic fantasies about them. However, that plan also crashed and burned because the guy ended up hopelessly in love. And don't even try judging our boy Parker, because I know all of you would have fallen for her too. I know you guys. If you've made it this far, leave a like and a comment, guys. Seriously, it costs absolutely nothing. Comment the rock guy and make sure you're subscribed as well. The boy started imagining himself marrying her and building a family together. He even pictured them raising a slightly rebellious teenage son. And eventually, he imagined himself as an old man growing old beside her. But Jason ended up smacking Parker across the face and told him to stop fantasizing about a romance with that girl. Just because it was the first time in 5 years that he had seen a real girl didn't mean she was interested in him. It seemed that his imaginary friend's master plan had completely failed, and the boy was now utterly lost in love. Pointing a finger at him, Jason told him that in situations like this, the only thing that truly matters is the final objective. When he started viewing girls as rocks, he stopped falling in love, and as a result, he also stopped getting his heart broken. That was because, as we already know, he had been deeply traumatized. But all it took was one girl who didn't look like a rock for him to fall in love all over again. It seemed he had absolutely no resistance against beautiful girls, so he would need to train himself to handle it. Parker knew that if things continued like this, he would end up repeating the same mistakes he had made in the past. He would confess his feelings and, as usual, walk away disappointed. But Jason told him that this simply meant he had to stay calm around that girl and avoid developing feelings for her. The following day, he went to school and, just as expected, crossed paths with her again while doing everything he could to keep his composure. The mysterious girl noticed his strange expression and looked slightly confused. She told her friend Young that the boy who had called her beautiful was standing at the end of the hallway. Parker asked Jason whether this plan would really work and if staying calm would actually be enough since he had no experience dealing with beautiful girls. Jason replied that he simply needed to put in some effort and try smiling so he would appear more natural. The boy forced such an awkward smile that he ended up frightening the girl. He was so nervous that he practically radiated a dark aura. Charisma level, final boss encounter. Young told Seika that she should at least go say hello to him. While trembling with anxiety, Parker convinced himself that the girls couldn't see him from that distance, so he simply turned his back on them and walked away. Seika couldn't make sense of any of it. Why did that boy behave so strangely? Young explained that Parker was actually very popular among the girls. Many girls had tried talking to him and even asked him out, but he always turned them down, and everyone said he had absolutely no interest in women. He mostly kept to himself and focused entirely on his studies. He was the classic handsome and mysterious guy in class. The blonde girl then burst into laughter and said that if he acted that weird around Seika, it probably meant he liked her. But naturally, Seika didn't believe that and insisted there was no way he could be interested in her. Still, she remembered that he had called her beautiful. With a quiet laugh, she admitted that there was actually something about him that had made her curious. Later on, our hero arrived at the classroom. He was discussing the stay calm strategy with his imaginary friend and felt that it wasn't working very well. Jason then suggested that he needed to get used to Seika's face so he would stop panicking every time he saw her. But in order to get used to seeing her, he would have to follow her around the entire school, which would make him look like a complete stalker. Then Jason asked whether he would rather look like a loser or a stalker. When it was put that way, Parker decided it would be much easier to look at photographs of her and even considered creating an Instagram account just to follow her. Giving him a thumbs up, Jason declared that it was an excellent idea because seeing her photos regularly would help him adapt to her extraordinary beauty. Later, he ended up meeting the girl and, completely nervous, asked for her Instagram. Seika looked a little suspicious at first, but then she smiled and said she would give it to him. She even asked for his phone, saying that she would search for her account herself and follow him. As a result, she ended up taking Parker's phone, but then she was met with quite a surprise. She realized that he had absolutely no posts and no followers. The girl then asked whether he had just created the account, and he nervously admitted that he had. The truth was that he had never liked social media because he considered it a waste of time. Then Seika started laughing uncontrollably. He had no idea what was so funny, and the girl asked why she was the very first person he searched for after creating his account. At that moment, Parker felt like he had completely exposed the fact that he liked her. My God, she's going to realize that I'm in love with her. Laughing, she commented that she found the whole thing hilarious. It was pretty obvious that he was completely fixated on her. Parker turned toward Jason to ask what he should do, and the guy looked absolutely horrified. Stammering nervously, Parker explained that he had just created the account and that she was simply the first person he happened to see in the hallway. She simply replied, "Oh, I see," and she accepted the explanation while typing her username into his phone. With an incredibly sweet expression, she asked whether he wanted her phone number too. I think this is a trap, he thought, but he was so nervous that he could barely form a sentence. Giving him a light and friendly tap on the shoulder, the girl said she was only teasing him before handing his phone back. As she walked away from Parker, she reminded him not to forget to like lots of her pictures. At that moment, the boy's mind was in complete chaos. He couldn't tell whether she was merely teasing him or if she was genuinely interested in him. And once again, he began imagining an entire romantic future with her, complete with children and a happily ever after ending. But Jason immediately told him to stop having those delusions. Later that day, the girl returned home, lay down on her bed, and started scrolling through her phone. She kept laughing because she found the entire situation incredibly amusing. That was mainly because Parker had absolutely no talent for taking pictures, and she even commented that all of his photos were hilariously bad. Meanwhile, while the boy was asleep, notifications started appearing on his phone. It was Seika liking his photos. Looks like things were finally going well for our protagonist, guys. The next day, the girl arrived in class and told Young that Parker had actually created an Instagram account just to follow her. The account was brand new, making it painfully obvious that he was interested in her. Still, there was something she couldn't stop wondering about. She wanted to ask Young whether Parker truly had no interest in girls because he seemed very interested in her. At that moment, our protagonist happened to walk past the window, and Young suddenly came up with an idea. She would prove to Seika that the boy wasn't interested in girls at all. She went out into the hallway and called Parker over. Pretending to be helpless, she claimed that she had twisted her ankle and fallen to the ground. Using every bit of charm she could muster, she asked him to help her get back up. The boy put on his usual indifferent Sigma expression, looking completely uninterested. That was because every girl except Seika still looked like a rock to him. So he simply picked her up as if she weighed nothing and immediately walked away without a second thought. That made Young shake with anger, while Seika burst out laughing and said he had lifted her like a carrot, the same way a farmer harvests vegetables. And naturally, that only made Young even angrier since a girl as attractive as her had been completely ignored. Later, our protagonist was already leaving school. He had spent practically the entire day looking through Seika's Instagram photos. And every time he saw her, he fell a little deeper in love and turned even redder. It seemed he still had a very long way to go before becoming accustomed to seeing her face. At that point, Jason remarked that they needed to uncover the real cause behind all this. Why was she the only girl he couldn't see as a rock? Parker nervously admitted that he had already come up with a few theories. Meanwhile, farther ahead, Seika was standing near the school's entrance. Then she noticed him approaching. The boy immediately started trembling while wondering what he should do. Oh God, this can't be happening. I keep running into her everywhere. He asked what she was doing there, and the girl explained that she didn't have any money left for the bus ride home. He asked whether she lived far away, and she replied that she lived in some apartments located in Villa Semo. Hold on a second. Villa Semo is only about 4 blocks from here. That's pretty close. At that moment, the girl looked slightly embarrassed and explained that she actually suffered from chronic anemia. After hearing that, he offered to pay for her bus fare. However, she told him that wasn't necessary. What she really wanted was for him to walk her home, inviting him to accompany her. What? No way. Does she seriously want me to walk down the street with her? Parker could act like the ultimate Sigma around everyone else, but when it came to Seika, he turned into a complete nervous wreck. So he ended up walking her home. Throughout the trip, she kept talking non-stop, while all he heard was an endless stream of blah blah blah. He couldn't process a single thing she was saying, all because of his nerves. Then she asked whether he was actually paying attention, and he replied, yes, of course I'm listening. Right after saying that, he accidentally bumped into her. In the past, there had been occasions when he became friends with a girl and walked her home. His classmates would often tease them by saying they looked like a couple. And during one of those occasions, the girl openly stated that she would never date a nerd like Parker. Hearing those words crushed him because he had feelings for that girl. After that, the trauma only grew worse and worse. And now, in the present, he was terrified that history would repeat itself, that someone would assume they were dating and Seika would say she would never go out with him. As they continued walking, Seika gradually slowed down and started falling behind. At that moment, Parker noticed that she was breathing heavily. When he turned around, he discovered that the girl had collapsed onto the ground, completely exhausted. He immediately rushed over and asked whether she had tripped or gotten hurt. She then explained that it was because of her chronic anemia and that walking for long periods made her weak. She reached out her hand and asked him to help her up. So he helped the girl get back on her feet. She thanked him and even apologized for causing trouble. Parker became incredibly flustered just from holding Seika's hand. Critical damage to the protagonist's emotional operating system. While she was trying to recover, her vision was still blurry and her body felt weak. He realized that she hadn't been lying about her chronic anemia. On the other hand, Seika noticed how nervous he was acting. When he had interacted with Young, he seemed completely calm. That could only mean that he was genuinely interested in her. And the girl started laughing. She even pointed out that he became unbelievably nervous around her, whereas he had lifted Young like a farmer harvesting carrots. At that point, she said they had finally reached the entrance to her apartment building, and that it was time to say goodbye. She thanked him for accompanying her home, and then waved farewell. The boy turned around, hoping that something like this would never happen again because it had been an incredibly stressful experience for him. He even wished that she would have enough money for the bus the next day since walking her home was far too difficult for him. Honestly, this was one of those moments when you just wanted to give this guy a wake-up slap. He was already walking away from Seika. Then an idea suddenly crossed her mind. She quickly turned around and said she had almost forgotten something important. The moment she called out to Parker, he nearly jumped out of his skin again. She explained that it would take a little longer before she received her allowance. The girl approached him, visibly tired and sweating quite a bit, and asked whether she could count on him again to walk her home next time. She even mentioned that she had gotten dizzy just from running after him. The situation was pretty awkward, but Jason said he had a question for his friend. He wanted to know why Parker looked so happy about it. However, at that very moment, the girl suddenly collapsed to the ground, causing him to panic. She explained that she felt very weak and apologized for troubling him so much. So he helped her back to her feet once again. The following day, Young was busy practicing kicks. All of it was part of her plan to get revenge on Parker because she still felt humiliated by what had happened in the hallway the day before. Jason, in his muscular form, commented that he had spent a long time thinking about the reason Parker couldn't see Seika as a rock. That girl had simply appeared out of nowhere. Because of that, Jason believed he had come up with a very convincing theory. He ended up sharing that theory with our protagonist. But unfortunately, we never get to hear what it was, guys. Judging by Parker's reaction, though, it seemed absolutely mind-blowing. Our hero thought the explanation made perfect sense, and even asked Jason whether there could be any other possibility. But the muscular man replied that he couldn't think of any alternative explanation. While grabbing their backpacks, they agreed to continue discussing the matter after school. I don't know about you guys, but this protagonist seems crazier than ever. He's definitely missing a few screws. He left his room and noticed someone standing in the kitchen. It was none other than his father, wearing a serious expression. The boy bowed politely and asked his father whether he had slept well. His father answered that he had and also told him to go eat breakfast. But the big guy replied that he wasn't hungry. His father even mentioned that his mother had made pancakes and that he should eat properly so he could learn a lot at school. Even so, the boy insisted that he wasn't hungry and said it was already time to leave for school. He felt extremely nervous whenever he was around his father. He was so tense that cold sweat started forming. When he arrived at school, he told Jason that the theory actually made a lot of sense, and that if it was true, he would be doomed to see Seika as a normal girl for the rest of his life. At that moment, Young appeared behind him in the hallway. She called out to Parker, and he turned around. She was staring directly at our protagonist with an extremely serious expression. Then, with a rather unsettling smile, she announced that she was going to hit him. What? Why? What do you mean you're going to hit me? She explained that she had spent her time practicing low kicks, specifically so she could get revenge on him. All because she had never felt as humiliated as she did the previous day in the hallway. He couldn't understand how helping her stand up could possibly be considered humiliating. The girl declared that she would deliver 3 low kicks to settle the score. What? I'm not letting you kick me. Have you lost your mind? She launched the first kick, but he managed to dodge it. Then he immediately took off running at full speed. Young bent her knees and declared that she was pretty fast too. And just like that, Parker realized she was actually catching up to him. He still saw her as a rock. Because of that, he had a hard time even identifying who the person chasing him was. My God, it looks like a rolling boulder. At that moment, she closed the distance and announced that she had finally caught him. She prepared to unleash her ultimate kick. If that attack connected, the boy would be in serious trouble. But unfortunately for Young, Seika stepped out of the classroom at that exact moment and found the two of them sprinting through the hallway. And the one who ended up taking that low kick was none other than Seika. The poor girl cried out in pain, and Young instantly realized she had made a terrible mistake. As a result, Seika suffered damage to the ligaments in her ankle. Parker immediately rushed over in concern to check whether the girl he loved was okay, but he was so nervous that he tripped over his own feet and crashed into the floor. As a result, he ended up breaking his nose. And just like that, one giant misunderstanding left both of them injured. Young stood there completely frozen after realizing she was responsible for the entire disaster. As a result, both of them ended up in the infirmary. Seika had her foot wrapped in bandages, while Parker was sporting a bandaged nose. Seika apologized for her friend's behavior, explaining that Young had always been a little unusual. Once again, he found himself trapped alone with that girl. He even asked Jason for help, but his imaginary friend told him he was on his own. He needed to keep his composure. However, acting naturally beside such a beautiful girl was incredibly difficult. Then Seika turned toward him and asked what was being served in the cafeteria for lunch that day. He replied that fried chicken was on the menu, and she commented that it sounded absolutely delicious. She asked whether he ate breakfast before coming to school, and he answered that he usually didn't. Then she asked whether he ever got hungry. He revealed that whenever he woke up early, his father was still at home, and because of that he avoided breakfast since he felt uncomfortable around him. Seika told him that he should try getting along better with his father, and he ended up agreeing. In fact, talking with her was actually pretty pleasant. Even so, he still couldn't stop remembering that painfully embarrassing moment when he told her she was incredibly beautiful. He couldn't really understand why he had said that without thinking. But now that he was looking at her again, he finally understood. It was because she was genuinely beautiful. The girl noticed him staring at her and asked directly whether he was admiring her beauty. Completely flustered, he insisted that it wasn't like that at all. Then she said she was only joking and apologized if she had made him uncomfortable. As she sat down, she remarked that teasing him was actually very fun. A little embarrassed, he asked what she meant by that, and she replied that she meant exactly what she had said. Whenever she teased him, he reacted in a very cute and endearing way. Hearing that only made him even more shy, and Seika kept laughing, saying that he was really fun to be around. She even ended up telling him that she genuinely thought he was adorable. Without understanding what was happening, he began wondering whether she was simply teasing him or whether she actually enjoyed spending time with him. At that moment, he remembered the conversation he had with Jason in his room, when his imaginary friend explained why he saw Seika as a real person instead of a rock. It was because he had fallen in love with her at first sight, and no rock perception could block that feeling. If that was truly the case, our protagonist would have to decide whether this love was worth accepting or not. He kept thinking about it while talking with her in the infirmary. A little later, Young showed up to take responsibility for what had happened. Seika declared that she would return the kick. That way, things would be even between them. The adorable girl shouted that she was going all out and threw a kick, but unfortunately our protagonist somehow ended up caught in the crossfire again. Looks like I ended up suffering the consequences again. That night, he dreamed that he confessed his feelings to Seika. She turned around, ignored him, and said she would never date someone like him. She even called him a pathetic loser. At that instant, he woke up in a panic. He heard a voice asking whether he had been having a nightmare. When he looked toward the chair by his desk, he realized it was Jason sitting there in pajamas. I'm telling you, this protagonist is completely unhinged. He told his imaginary friend that he had dreamed about confessing to Seika. Jason replied that the dream was simply a result of his trauma. In fact, he had been having a lot of dreams like that lately. Maybe it would be better to just ignore that girl altogether. At least, that was Jason's opinion. All of it stemmed from his fear that his feelings would not be returned. Everything he was experiencing was fear caused by the wounds of the past. But Jason had another idea. He said, "Know your enemy and know yourself, and you'll win every battle." He arrived at school thinking about those words, imagining that he should try getting to know Seika a little better. Now that he thought about it, it sounded like a pretty solid strategy. He went to Seika's classroom and became extremely nervous the moment he arrived. He noticed there were many students around, and he was still seeing every girl as if she were a rock. He looked for Seika, but she wasn't there. Then a boy appeared and said that seat belonged to him, and that his name was Guan. Hold on a second. Who is this guy? The chubby boy sat down with a rather annoyed expression. Jason immediately got angry and said he wanted to beat that pig up. Our protagonist asked whether the seat in front of him belonged to Seika, and Guan answered rudely, "Yeah, sometimes she comes and sits there. Besides, random brats who are obsessed with girls like her show up all the time." Our protagonist asked why he was talking like that, and Jason, absolutely furious, declared that he was going to destroy that pig. Parker tried to stay calm and asked whether Guan happened to know where Seika was, but the boy responded by asking why he would know anything about that cursed girl. Hearing that made our hero angry, and he told Guan never to talk about her that way again. But Guan said he didn't care because that girl was cursed anyway. At that moment, Parker started taking off his uniform jacket and challenged the boy to a fight. Looks like protective protagonist mode had been activated. Guan declared that he wasn't going to let a bunch of nerds push him around. Then Parker grabbed his uniform jacket and started smacking Guan with it. While getting beaten up, the boy began making noises that sounded suspiciously like a pig. Right then, Seika arrived and asked what those strange pig noises were. Our hero explained that Guan was the culprit because he had been provoking him. He also said that the guy had called Seika a cursed girl, so he started hitting him. However, the adorable Seika replied that it was fine because Guan always acted like that. Parker even asked what was wrong with that chubby guy. Then Seika explained that the two of them had known each other since they were children. They were childhood friends, so he felt comfortable talking to her that way. Outside the classroom, Parker apologized to Guan for hitting him, but the boy replied that it was fine because it hadn't even hurt. Seriously, you two have been friends since childhood? And Guan answered that yes, they had known each other since they were about 3 years old. This was the perfect chance to learn more about Sika. However, Guan immediately warned him that if he was in love with her, he should give up. That was because Sika was insanely popular, and practically every second-year student had a crush on her. For that reason, Parker's chances of success were basically 0%. Parker already knew Sika was popular, but he had no idea it was on that level. She even had more than 2,000 followers on Instagram. But the chubby boy explained that the reason he was telling Parker to give up wasn't because it was impossible. He had known Sika ever since they were little kids. They had always attended the same schools and naturally spent a lot of time together. However, during elementary school, he noticed that Sika began to change. He used to joke around by calling her the cursed girl, but then he started realizing that something about her was different. She seemed to give off a strange dark aura that genuinely made Guan feel uneasy. She was definitely no longer the same Sika he had known before. He explained that from that point onward, she was never quite the same, almost as if she were hiding some deep mystery. That was why he was telling our protagonist to give up. The scene shifts to a little later. As they walked through the hallway, Parker couldn't stop thinking about how mysterious that girl was. He already found her somewhat unsettling, and Guan's story only made her seem even more mysterious. At that moment, they ended up running into the girls. Sika asked whether the two of them had suddenly become best friends. The girls also asked what they had been doing, but Parker thought it would be a terrible idea to admit they had been talking about her. Unfortunately, the chubby guy opened his mouth without hesitation and announced that they had been gossiping about the cursed girl known as Sika. Parker was instantly horrified, wondering why this walking loudspeaker had decided to say that out loud. Completely panicked, he asked the boy why he would admit something like that. Looking slightly concerned, Sika asked whether they had been speaking badly about her. Young immediately jumped in and claimed she had always known Parker had bad intentions. And Guan added that he had been telling Parker all about how awful Sika supposedly was. Parker was already taking off his uniform again so he could punch that pig, while the other guy started making pig noises. Even Jason was saying he wanted to destroy that idiot. Sika asked what was wrong with the two of them, while Young said they should simply leave the boys alone because they were busy doing guy things. But deep down, Sika couldn't help worrying that Guan might actually have been saying bad things about her. Later, our protagonist was heading home. He felt that the day had been completely unproductive because he had learned nothing concrete about Sika. He wanted to understand her much better, just as Jason had suggested, but all he had gained were even more misunderstandings. The person who suddenly appeared behind our protagonist was none other than Sika. She called out to Parker and as she approached, asked whether he had enjoyed talking behind her back. The boy immediately began stammering, insisting that it wasn't like that at all. Oh god, that chubby guy got me into serious trouble. With a small smile, she said she was only teasing him. Parker explained that they hadn't actually been saying bad things about her. It's that chubby guy who's always saying ridiculous stuff. Giving our hero a light pat on the shoulder, she told him that she already knew that because Guan had always acted that way. What she really wanted was for him to walk her home again. She explained that just climbing the slope leading to her apartment was enough to make her tired and short of breath. Jason pointed out that although they hadn't been speaking badly about Sika, they had still been talking about her behind her back, causing Parker to feel guilty. He couldn't stop thinking that he had lied because he claimed they hadn't talked about her when technically they had. At that moment, the girl called to him and pointed out that the slope ahead was exactly what had made her struggle to breathe the other day. He asked whether climbing such a small hill was really that difficult. She replied that for her, it definitely was. Because of her chronic anemia, she felt exhausted and weak even after walking only a short distance. That was why she asked him to help by gently pushing her from behind. That way, getting home would be much easier. The boy immediately began trembling, and with nervous fingers, he carefully placed his hands against Sika's back. Completely flustered, he started pushing her a little faster, and she admitted that it really did make climbing easier. With a light laugh, she commented that it even tickled. She also added that her back was extremely sensitive whenever someone touched it. The moment he heard that, his cheeks instantly turned bright red. The mission to maintain composure was taking critical damage, and right then, those romantic fantasies started invading his mind again. The distraction caused him to push her much faster than he intended. He even imagined that if he became closer to her, he could carry her on his back to help her up the slope. Jason continued talking about how beautiful love was. He had already started imagining the children Parker might have with her, and just thinking about that was enough to make him completely melt. At that moment, the girl began pleading with him to slow down because she could no longer keep up. He quickly apologized while she stood there trying to catch her breath. Then he realized that he had pushed her much farther than necessary, but the view from the top was genuinely beautiful. From there, they could see several buildings stretching across the distance. The girl remarked that she had never made it all the way up to that area before, and admitted that it was a really beautiful place. She had no idea such a wonderful view existed so close to her home. She even commented that for someone with anemia, climbing to elevated places was quite difficult. And thanks to him, she was now even farther away from her apartment than before. She even jokingly asked whether he was secretly trying to kill her. He apologized for pushing her much farther than he should have. However, since he had shown her such a beautiful spot, she decided to let it slide this time. The boy was left completely speechless because she was simply too beautiful, and he froze on the spot. As she adjusted her hair, she remarked that the scenery was truly breathtaking. He felt an overwhelming urge to confess his feelings. But then he remembered what Guan had said about there being something strange about Seika. Even so, he was so deeply in love that he couldn't focus on anything except her. It was as if his entire world revolved around a single girl. At last, he called Seika by name and admitted that he really had been talking about her with Guan. She asked whether that was actually true. "Were you talking about me? Seriously?" He replied that it was true because Guan had mentioned they were childhood friends, but he quickly clarified that they had never spoken badly about her. The only thing he wanted was to learn more about her. That was why he had been asking questions to someone who had known her since childhood. When she heard that he wanted to know more about her, the girl's cheeks gradually turned red. Looks like even she had a limit for romance. He swore that he had never talked badly about her behind her back, and that all he wanted was to understand her better. He was only saying all of this to make sure she didn't misunderstand the situation. However, it sounded far more like a love confession, and the girl didn't quite know how to respond. So she told him not to worry about it because she had already forgotten the whole thing. After that, they agreed to head back down the hill. She started walking down the slope by herself, and he asked whether she wasn't worried about falling. She replied that she would be fine and that she was counting on him to help her get home again the next day. "Why did she leave me here all by myself?" Jason commented that it was incredibly difficult to figure out what the girl was thinking. He even wondered whether Parker really needed to be that honest, since what he had said sounded almost exactly like a confession. Jason also suggested that perhaps she had become very embarrassed, and that was why she decided to go down the hill alone. Deep down, it was clear that Seika wore a somewhat mysterious expression. She was thinking about Parker's words when he said that all he wanted was to know her better. With a small smile, she remarked that he could be surprisingly unpredictable at times. After that, she continued walking by herself but eventually collapsed to the ground because of her anemia, saying she felt extremely weak. The next day, our hero arrived at school. Jason asked him what he was doing. He replied that he was going to play soccer. Jason commented that this was excellent because girls tend to like athletic guys. At that moment, Parker looked down and noticed one of his shoelaces was untied. He bent over to tie it and suddenly heard someone calling him. It was a teacher telling him that he shouldn't stand in the middle of the walkway. She even mentioned that she had nearly tripped over him because he was blocking the path. The woman was Gina, a 26-year-old teacher. Parker apologized to teacher Gina, and she replied that he should stop looking at her from that angle because it made her uncomfortable. He apologized again and asked why he wasn't supposed to look at her that way. She answered that girls don't like being stared at like that. She even said it was quite embarrassing while squeezing his head. "I don't know about you guys, but this teacher definitely has a unique personality." She also added that when he looked at her that way, he seemed less attractive, and then she walked away. The boy stood there wondering why the teacher had said that. He didn't care much about her opinion because, after all, she was just another rock in his eyes. His fear of rejection was so intense that he viewed every girl as nothing more than a stone. On top of that, he constantly made sure not to fall in love again. Since he had plenty of free time, he invested a lot of effort into improving himself. Besides that, he was exceptionally skilled at soccer. He ended up scoring an incredible goal against Guan, and all of his classmates began congratulating him, saying he was genuinely talented. Meanwhile, Guan felt completely humiliated after conceding such an amazing goal. At the same time, the girls were walking outside and commenting that the boys were playing soccer and that the classroom would probably smell like sweat once they returned. Parker stood out among all the students, which naturally caught the attention of both girls, since everyone seemed to be talking about him. 3 girls were discussing how good Parker was at soccer, and how that was one of the reasons they liked him so much. Seika realized that Parker was genuinely popular with girls because everyone was talking about him and even commenting on how attractive he was. She overheard one of the girls saying that he was handsome and very charming. Then Young asked Seika whether she finally believed that Parker was actually popular. The girl thought about it for a moment and realized that he behaved completely differently whenever he was around her. That probably meant he had feelings for her. Because of that, she finally admitted that maybe Parker really was in love with her. During the break, everyone kept congratulating Parker, saying he was an absolute beast on the soccer field. The boy noticed that he was drenched in sweat and thought it would be better to wash up a little before returning to class. He headed to the sink area, turned on the faucet, and started cleaning himself up. At that moment, someone appeared and said that his shot had been incredible. Guan commented that there was no way he could have stopped a strike like that. Our protagonist praised him as well, saying that he had done a great job as goalkeeper, but the chubby boy replied that he found that comment offensive. With a puzzled look on his face, Guan asked whether he knew about football's darker side. Our hero replied that he had absolutely no clue. The dark side is that whenever a team loses, the goalkeeper ends up carrying all the blame. A keeper can block 10 shots in a row, but the moment one ball gets past him, everyone points fingers at him. That was why he claimed he could never stand Parker, since the guy was an outstanding striker. Jason immediately lost his temper, shouting that this shameless pig had started picking on him again. The chubby boy then began messing with the faucet, aiming the water straight at our protagonist. The stream splashed directly into his eyes, and Parker complained that the water was freezing cold. Naturally, he decided to return the favor. And just like that, an all-out water battle broke out. The two started trading insults, and the chubby boy called our protagonist Four Eyes. "Hold on a second, idiot. Aren't you wearing glasses too?" Watching from above, the girls wondered why boys could be so immature. They tried figuring out what the argument was about, but they could not make out a single word. Young suggested moving closer so they could uncover what the boys were up to. The whole thing looked like a showdown straight out of a Western movie. Parker angrily complained that the filthy pig had soaked every piece of his clothing. Guan then pulled off his shirt and declared that they should settle things with their fists. Parker agreed immediately and said they might as well end it once and for all. The two girls continued approaching while asking what was happening. At that exact moment, Parker realized the girl he liked was staring right at him while he was shirtless. And honestly, our protagonist was in excellent shape. All that training had paid off. Young instantly blushed because Parker was undeniably handsome. Sika glanced at her friend and noticed that the blonde looked unusually flustered. Meanwhile, Guan was not exactly blessed with a striking physique, so both girls reacted with visible disappointment. Right afterward, they turned around and pretended they had seen absolutely nothing. Guan immediately called out to them, telling them to come back and witness how he would defeat Parker. He even cursed our protagonist for making him embarrass himself. Wait a second, Seika just saw my body. You cursed pig. One day I'm turning you into breakfast bacon. The two girls felt somewhat awkward after seeing Parker without a shirt. Seika, however, wore a rather mysterious expression. Not gonna lie, it looks like someone might be catching feelings too. The story then moves to the following day. Our hero was playing football once again, but this time Guan actually managed to stop one of his shots. Parker got annoyed and called his friend a filthy pig. The chubby boy laughed and said that kick looked like something a little kid would do. What's wrong with you today, Parker? You're playing terribly. His teammates started pointing out that he was performing far below his usual level. Jason remarked that his dear friend seemed distracted. Parker claimed he was simply tired and said he would take a short break. With that excuse, he headed over to sit down. Meanwhile, the girls were chatting nearby about how attractive Parker was. Just then, someone approached him and remarked that he looked exhausted. It was Seika herself, greeting him with a charming smile. The young man instantly became nervous, and his cheeks turned bright red, exposing every bit of his embarrassment. He asked her to crouch down slightly because he did not want to look at her from below. He remembered something Professor Gina had once told him. People supposedly looked worse when viewed from underneath. She had mentioned it while tying her shoelaces in the hallway. Completely confused, the girl asked what he meant. She even wondered why he was avoiding eye contact. He quickly explained that it was not what she was thinking. He clarified that Professor Gina had told him people appeared unattractive when viewed from a lower angle. That was why he did not want her to see him looking bad. Sika tilted her head slightly and asked, "So, does that mean I look ugly just because I'm standing lower?" He immediately answered no. There's absolutely no way you could ever look ugly. If anything, you're always beautiful. The second those words left his mouth, he realized he had said far too much. And to make matters worse, the girl stepped even closer with a playful expression. Our protagonist began making awkward gestures as he realized that, once again, everything he said sounded suspiciously like a love confession. Jason even commented that if he kept this up, he would walk straight into every trap she set. Well, buddy, you literally just said she's beautiful from every angle. That was basically a confession. Yeah, my friend, you're on your own now. I'm done saving you. He scratched the back of his head and complained that he had a cursed mouth because he always ended up blurting out exactly what he was thinking. Meanwhile, she continued staring at him. I don't know about you guys, but this girl is incredibly mysterious. It is impossible to tell what is actually going through her mind. The only thing I know for certain is that she likes him. She then thanked him for the compliment, completely catching the big guy off guard. She even asked whether he was trying to make her happy with those words, and admitted that, if so, it was working. After all, compliments always felt nice to hear. The big guy agreed and said that was true. She then mentioned that she constantly overheard other girls praising him, saying he had an attractive physique and a handsome face. He raised both hands and insisted there was no point in saying that because he simply could not believe it. Sika responded by saying she did not disagree with those girls at all. In fact, she thought they were completely right. Wait a minute, she thinks I'm attractive too? Seriously? Which part do you agree with? The girl then remembered Parker's athletic and muscular physique. Afterward, she slowly leaned closer and whispered into his ear that she found him attractive as well. The boy was completely smitten. Honestly, guys, there is no point judging our beloved protagonist anymore. He never stood a chance. I'm pretty sure most of you would have fallen for her with far less effort. She kept gazing at him with that beautiful smile on her face. With a look like that, resisting would be nearly impossible. Just then, one of his teammates showed up and told Parker it was time to get back into the match. He stood up and apologized to Seika. She called out to him, saying she would be cheering for him. At that moment, Parker's motivation skyrocketed through the roof. Jason, I finally get why I was playing so badly. Turns out all I needed was a little motivation. He immediately started weaving past every defender in his path. Jason nodded and said their big guy finally had something worth fighting for, so there was no reason to keep telling him to give up on his feelings. Since the girl he liked was watching from the sidelines, he returned to playing at an incredible level. While stroking his mustache, Jason remarked that he was officially taking back all of his previous advice. Maybe chasing after that romance was not such a terrible idea after all. As a result, Parker scored an absolute masterpiece of a goal. Jason admitted that love might actually be making the kid stronger. All of his teammates celebrated, saying Parker had finally returned to his usual form, and he answered with an excited grin. Seika noticed that he was genuinely popular, not only among the girls but among the boys as well. And after realizing that, her feelings for him only grew stronger. Eventually, their team managed to win the match. While Parker was chatting with Seika afterward, Professor Gina happened to walk by and overheard everything they said. The following day, he returned home and noticed his parents talking. His mother seemed frustrated because she had purchased 2 tickets to a theater performance, but his father would have to work that day. She then turned around to greet her son. Rushing over to him, she asked whether he was hungry because he looked exhausted. He replied that he had already eaten on the way home, but his mother insisted that she had prepared a wonderful meal. Unfortunately, he could never bring himself to eat when his father was around. The atmosphere between them was far too uncomfortable. Jason, staying true to his muscle-brain personality, reminded our protagonist that protein was essential for maintaining those gains. His mother explained that she had 2 tickets for a theater show and had originally planned to attend with Parker's father, but he would be working that evening. So she decided to hand the tickets to our hero and suggested that he invite someone from school. She also mentioned how much she had been looking forward to spending time with her husband, but the man had been working almost every day for weeks. As Parker stared at the tickets, he began wondering who he could invite. The problem was that asking Seika felt way too embarrassing. He first tried inviting one of his classmates, but the boy said he could not make it. Then he approached several other friends, but every single one of them claimed to be busy. He even asked Guan, but the chubby boy said he would probably be sick that day. Yeah, nobody seemed interested in going to the theater with him. Come on, man. I thought this was your kind of thing. Don't you watch anime? It's basically the same idea. Guan replied that he did not watch anime at all. After saying that, he turned around and left. Now that's unexpected. Why did I instantly assume he watched anime? Was it because he looks like a stereotypical nerd? Jason pointed out that stereotypes could be surprisingly scary. The author of this story basically called every anime fan weird. At that moment, he noticed Professor Gina approaching and asking what he was trying to do. He explained that he was attempting to find someone to attend the theater performance with him, but nobody wanted to go. Jason quietly suggested that he should just invite Seika already. Even the teacher asked whether the person he truly wanted to go with was Seika, but he lacked the courage to ask her. He immediately denied it, insisting that he simply wanted to attend with one of his friends. He even tried putting some distance between himself and the teacher, so she would not discover his crush. Unfortunately for him, she called him right back. What's wrong, Parker? Are you seriously going to lie to your teacher? He swore that he was not lying and that inviting Seika was not what he wanted. Looking thoroughly unimpressed, she asked whether he honestly believed anyone would fall for such a weak excuse. At that moment, he completely froze. Oh no, how does she know I like Seika? The two of them eventually sat down and continued talking. She asked whether he truly wanted to invite Seika and wondered why he did not simply speak to her directly. Even Professor Gina knew Seika was extremely popular, which made plenty of boys nervous around her. Parker then asked how she had figured out that he liked Seika. The teacher explained that she had overheard the entire conversation between him and Seika on the football field. Come on, it's obvious you're in love with her. You're just afraid she'll reject you, aren't you? He admitted that she was right because the whole thing felt incredibly embarrassing. So basically, you're scared of asking her out in front of everyone. She even pointed out that it would practically sound like a confession. The teacher then stood up, called him a coward, and with a smile assured him that one day he would thank her for this. Uh-oh, teacher intervention activated. She walked straight over to Seika and told her that Parker wanted to say something. The boy immediately started shouting in panic. Then the teacher asked Seika whether she would like to attend a theater performance with Parker over the weekend. Young burst out laughing and pointed out that Parker had somehow gotten the teacher to confess on his behalf. Professor Gina excused herself, telling Seika to continue talking with Parker, and the girl walked over to him. The situation was unbelievably awkward because now he might get rejected in front of absolutely everyone. While fixing her hair, Seika asks if he would like to go out with her. His heart starts racing, and the guy has no idea how to respond. Stammering, he says, "Yes, I would like to go out with her to see a stage play." Over the weekend, there was our hero, dressed in a different outfit and looking all nice. He never imagined that she would accept going on a date with him. Besides, it was the first time he had ever worn contact lenses, and he even comments that it feels a little strange. He asks Jason if, by any chance, his outfit looks tacky, and his imaginary friend keeps saying that it does not, and that he looks good. But his imaginary friend says that this was not the most important part. What he wanted to know was what kind of relationship Parker wished to have with Seika. You need to make up your mind now, kid. You clearly have romantic feelings for her. Besides, she accepted going out with you, so you probably have a chance of dating. But you have an extreme fear of rejection. That was because of everything he went through during his childhood. But now that you have feelings for her, you must try to face this trauma of yours. Parker says that he cannot set aside the feelings he has for Seika. Jason says that he must confront this trauma or else try meditating again in an attempt to see her as a rock. He even imagines it, seeing Seika as if she truly were a rock. So he would have to accept one of the two paths. Either you admit that you love her, or you try to forget her. At that moment, Seika appears wearing different clothes from what she used to wear at school. The guy becomes completely smitten. Jason even says that he will always stay by our hero's side to help him. And just by looking at the girl, he already knows what his choice should be. He would choose to love her and face all of his trauma. He had already gone through many difficult situations whenever he confessed his feelings to girls. On every occasion, he was rejected. Because of that, Jason said that it would be better for him to treat all girls as if they were rocks. Besides, he should not develop any kind of love. Thus, he became someone cold, without feelings, who saw all girls as if they were rocks. At the same time, he had a very difficult situation at home with his father. It seemed that the boy's father did not care about him. Returning to the present, they went to a cafe. Seika was drinking iced tea while he was drinking coffee, and she comments that he seems very mature. He had only ordered that coffee because it was the cheapest one. Seika asks how much time is left before the play begins, and he says that there is about an hour left. He was trying to look mature by drinking that coffee, and meanwhile he could not stop thinking about Jason's words, saying that he should finally admit that he was in love. But if he did that, he would have to overcome his trauma. At that moment, he becomes tense, asking himself whether he would be capable of doing that. He had spent 5 whole years seeing all girls as if they were rocks. At that instant, Seika asks what he was thinking about. He gets nervous and starts stammering, saying that he was only thinking that the coffee was bad, but she calls him a liar, saying that he was thinking about something else, since his mind seemed absent. How can you be thinking about something else when I am standing right in front of you? He realized that she was being serious. 2 hours were the amount of time she needed just to get ready, only to meet him. Besides that, she spent much more time simply choosing her outfit. She invested all of that just to meet him. So he was supposed to stop thinking about other things and focus on her. At that moment, he realized that it had been rude to keep getting distracted when such a beautiful girl was standing in front of him. Since he had invited her to a play and she had been very excited, she was going to let it slide. It was already time, and they stood up to head to the theater. For now, he was going to focus on this date that he was having with Seika, and would only think about those problems involving Jason later. They arrive at the theater. The actress was performing the play Romeo and Juliet *, and the actors were giving it their all. But it seemed that the play was not very good, guys. After all, our protagonist and Seika were both dying of sleepiness. Later, they went to a claw machine. He tried every possible way to win a teddy bear for her, but he could not do it. After that, they went to karaoke, and she kept laughing, saying that he sang very badly. Next, they went to eat a snack, and the girl offered to cut it for him. In the end, he walked the girl back to her house, and they talked along the way. The two got along very well, and seemed as though they had truly been made for each other. The girl says that it was very fun, and even thanks him for accompanying her all the way home. With a friendly look, she tells him to get home safely. But he did not say anything and simply stood there watching. She even asked whether he wanted to say something else, and, stammering, he did not really know how to express himself. So he says that the only thing he wanted to say was, "I had a great time today." Obviously, that was not what he really wanted to say. He wanted to ask whether he could go out with her another day. With a somewhat confused look, she asked, "Is that really it?" He began to stammer and could not ask her out again. So he ended up making yet another excuse, saying that he would see her again at school the next day. She lightly punched his shoulder and asked, "Why did it take you so long to say something that simple?" After that, she said goodbye and told him she would see him at school tomorrow. Meanwhile, he was busy regretting the fact that he had failed to ask her out on a second date. My goodness, am I really this much of a coward? Even though he desperately wanted to say all of those things to Seika, he simply could not bring himself to do it. A part of him was still terrified of being rejected. He feared that her response might leave him hurt. That was why he was afraid of getting too close to her. At the same time, he remembered Professor Gina's words, reminding him that if Seika had no interest in him, she never would have agreed to the date in the first place. Maybe if he returned to the mindset he had 5 years ago, everything would go back to normal. He would start seeing Seika as nothing more than a rock again. If he did that, he could regain the peace and comfort he once had. Just then, Seika called out to him again. She told him that next time they went out together, he should order iced tea instead of coffee. The boy turned around and saw that she was still standing there waiting for him. She then added that on their next date, she might order hot chocolate because it tasted much better. At that moment, he finally realized that she truly liked him. Even Jason stepped in and said it was time to move forward. Do you seriously want to go back to seeing her as a rock? You need to push ahead and deal with your fears. Forget this nonsense about treating Seika like she's a rock. Parker asked whether he was really capable of doing that, and Jason replied that he was, but he needed to find some courage. After all, he had let a teacher ask Seika out on his behalf. On top of that, he had stood there overthinking his problems right in front of her, allowed her to cut his food for him, and still failed to ask her on another date. It was time to stop hesitating and finally take action. Otherwise, he should admit that he was still a coward, and go back to treating her like an ordinary rock. Jason even apologized for sounding harsh, but insisted that he was only speaking the truth. In the end, kid, this choice belongs to you alone. Parker admitted that those thoughts were the mindset of a loser. Then he reached out, took Seika's hands and called her by name, completely catching her off guard. With red cheeks, she asked what was wrong. He apologized because that day's date had not gone perfectly, but promised to make the next one far better. He even mentioned that she had fallen asleep during the play because it was so boring and apologized for that as well. Naturally, Seika was completely stunned by what she heard. Then she let out a small laugh and told him it was not a problem at all. She even admitted that she had been eagerly waiting for him to ask her out again. The atmosphere suddenly became both awkward and sweet at the same time. He was still holding Seika's hands when he suddenly realized what he was doing. He quickly let go and apologized, saying he had not even noticed. She answered that it was perfectly fine. Then she asked him to show her something even more fun on their next date. After that, the two said goodbye once again. Parker's heart felt like it was about to burst right out of his chest. Meanwhile, Seika was also flustered and found herself staring at her own hands. Holding Parker's hand felt really comforting. The story then moves to the following day. The boy headed to a public park. The reason was simple. He wanted to train and become stronger. Looks like our protagonist finally decided to grind experience points in both romance and life at the same time. Jason was counting his repetitions, while Parker could think of nothing except what he could do to make his next date more exciting. Jason even praised him, saying he had behaved like a real man, though honestly, it had been much harder than it looked. While he was exercising, Young suddenly appeared, sweating heavily and breathing hard. He mentioned that he planned to continue training for about 40 more minutes. At that moment, Young showed up and called him a weakling. The boy nearly jumped out of his skin and asked who she was. Young replied that she was Seika's friend and wondered whether he seriously did not recognize her. She also commented that she never expected to find Parker training in the middle of the park. At that instant, Parker finally remembered who she was. After all, every girl looked like a rock to him back then, so telling them apart was never easy. Filled with enthusiasm, she declared that she would help him train. So Parker grabbed the pull-up bar, but Young immediately started yelling that he was doing everything wrong and even kicked him in the back. The poor guy crashed to the ground and started rolling across the dirt. "What is wrong with you? What are you doing?" he asked in confusion. She replied that if he kept training like that, he would end up with severe back pain. Then she told him to wait a moment because she would be right back. Parker called after her, telling her to hurry because he was only planning to train for a few more minutes. If she took too long, he would already be gone. With a serious expression, Young explained that she was only going to change into workout clothes, so he agreed to wait. Jason pointed out that this was the perfect opportunity because Young happened to be Seika's closest friend. He could use the chance to learn more about the girl he liked. After all, that chubby guy had not exactly been a reliable source of information. In other words, Young could help him uncover more about Seika's interests and preferences. "Do you think it would work if I casually asked Young a few questions?" Parker wondered. Jason told him there was no harm in trying. A little while later, the girl came back. Parker asked what exactly she had changed because she looked almost exactly the same. She explained that she had switched her shoes and changed her pants. He replied that he could not tell the difference since she still looked like a rock to him. Young immediately got annoyed and told him to stop wasting time and keep training. Parker then asked whether she and Seika were close friends. The blonde answered yes before asking if he was interested in Seika. "You like her, don't you?" "I already knew." He tried to play it off by saying it was not really like that. He was simply curious, that's all. But there was no point pretending, because even the chicken wandering nearby could tell he had feelings for Seika. Our protagonist turned around and saw the chicken acting as if it completely agreed. "Seriously, who put a chicken here?" The narrator deserves an explanation too. Young remarked that winning Seika over would be extremely difficult because she was incredibly popular, although that was not even the biggest issue. Resting a hand against her chin, Young explained that Seika was a very mysterious person. She was usually kind and friendly toward everyone at school. And despite how often they talked, Young felt as though she did not truly know her best friend or understand what was going on inside her head. They discussed all kinds of topics, but Seika never opened up about personal matters. It felt as if she was carrying countless secrets. Young even advised Parker to stay away from her because getting involved would only bring trouble. Parker reflected on how mysterious Seika really was, and realized he had felt that way since the first day he met her. While he was lost in thought, Young told him to focus on his workout and kicked him again, ordering him to stop daydreaming. The boy asked whether she was actually good at exercising because she seemed extremely enthusiastic about coaching him. Young asked whether he thought she was weak. He admitted that he genuinely had no idea. The girl then declared that she would prove how strong she was. With that, she took off her hoodie, revealing a surprisingly toned physique. As she showed off in front of him, she jokingly claimed he would probably end up falling for her. At this point, it is becoming suspiciously obvious that this girl has feelings for Parker too. Or maybe I have watched too many romance stories. Parker stared at Young with complete confusion. After all, she was still nothing more than a rock in his eyes. The poor girl truly believed she had a chance to charm him. So the training session continued, not too far away. Seika happened to be walking through the same area. She was carrying a shopping bag and, honestly, this girl somehow manages to look elegant no matter the situation. Passive skill unlocked. At that moment, she glanced ahead and spotted two girls from school. The girls were talking about Parker and mentioning that he was the best football player in the entire school. Not wanting to be recognized, Seika lowered the brim of her cap slightly. As she walked past them, the girls continued chatting about how beautiful the park was. It seemed like Seika felt a tiny bit jealous and even took a deep breath to calm herself down. However, she suddenly heard a familiar voice. It was Parker training alongside Young. She was surprised because she never expected to find them there together. A faint blush even appeared on her cheeks. Seeing Parker exercising with her best friend brought a small smile to her face. Right afterward, Young kicked him again while calling him an idiot and complaining that he was doing everything wrong. He was supposed to grip the bar like this. Young then began demonstrating the correct technique. She was genuinely skilled when it came to exercising. Yet Parker kept insisting that he could not see any difference between her method and his own. At that moment, the big guy turned around and noticed Seika standing right there. She waved at her friend, and Young instantly ran over to hug her. Our protagonist felt slightly awkward because she had appeared out of nowhere. Seika explained that she had gone out shopping and never expected to run into them training there. She even asked why there was a chicken standing in the middle of the running track. At that moment, she looked toward our protagonist and seemed a little embarrassed. He greeted her by name, and while she stretched out her hands, she attempted to grab the bar and asked whether she could actually do it. Parker commented that her anemia would probably make it difficult, while Young confidently stated that she would help her. She then instructed Seika to adjust her posture and step forward. Once Seika grabbed the bar, Young told her to pull herself upward. The girl began trying her best, although she admitted it was much harder than she expected. Then she suddenly realized something. She was face to face with Parker, and he was staring directly at her. That immediately made Seika feel shy. Young asked why her friend was taking so long. Seika tried again, but it was still incredibly difficult. and when she finally reached the top, she looked ahead and discovered that Parker was still staring at her. The only thing running through his mind was how someone could possibly be that beautiful. Meanwhile, Seika felt increasingly embarrassed because he refused to stop looking at her for even a second. Distracted by the situation, she accidentally let go of the bar and fell directly onto Young. "Are you two okay?" Parker asked as he rushed toward them. He even reminded Seika not to push herself too hard because of her anemia. After getting back up, Seika asked whether Young was alright. The blonde replied that the whole thing was the fault of that Four Eyes idiot who kept distracting her friend, which was exactly why she was upset. She then picked Seika up and declared that she was going to throw her straight at Parker, instantly turning the situation into complete chaos. Later on, Parker and Seika ended up walking home together. He remarked that the day had been pretty exhausting, but Seika replied that she had barely done anything at all. Smiling softly, she said she had really enjoyed learning new exercises from Young. Parker was still determined to learn more about Seika. However, he felt as though he had made absolutely no progress that day, although Jason argued that the day had been productive because he had trained quite a bit. Afterward, he walked her all the way to the entrance of her apartment building and told her he hoped to see her at school the next day. But when she did not respond, he asked whether there was something she wanted to say. Seika answered that it was nothing, though she still could not stop thinking about Parker training with Young. Then, looking slightly embarrassed, she asked whether he liked people who were good at sports. What? Why does she want to know that? He wondered. Well, I think it's good when someone stays healthy. Why wouldn't it be? Parker replied. That answer made Seika noticeably sad. And if you have watched even a few romance stories, you probably already know exactly why. She let out a small awkward laugh and said it was fine. She was just curious, that's all. After that, she said goodbye and headed off. Parker could not understand why she had asked such a strange question. Jason simply pointed out that his friend was completely clueless. He had somehow chosen the worst possible answer. Parker asked what he had done wrong. Jason told him to think about it on the way home. Parker always seemed to pick the worst possible option during the moments that mattered most. Just as Seika was entering her apartment building, the bird suddenly appeared and startled her. The translation claims it was a chicken, but let's be honest, that looked way more like a rooster. That night, Young made her way to the school's rooftop. She wanted to enjoy the view from above. However, she suddenly heard someone playing the piano. The melody sounded unsettling, and from up there she began feeling genuinely frightened. The whole situation felt like it had been lifted straight out of a horror movie. She immediately jumped in shock and started screaming while her entire body trembled. The next morning, she told her friends that she had heard a ghost playing the piano at school during the night. But, as expected, none of them believed her story. Only Seika seemed somewhat frightened deep down. Parker insisted that ghost stories were not real, although Jason looked surprisingly uncomfortable discussing the subject. Young commented that the ghost must have been incredibly talented because the piano performance sounded amazing. With a serious expression, the chubby boy asked whether Young really did not know the truth. Their school supposedly had a legend about a ghost haunting the music room. Long ago, a girl used to play the piano there every single night. However, during one of her classes, she ended up dying. Apparently, she choked on a piece of candy. Ever since then, her spirit had continued playing the piano every night. In other words, according to the story, the music Young heard the previous evening belonged to that girl. As the chubby boy continued telling the tale, Seika looked increasingly terrified. Parker remarked that it was the dumbest ghost story he had ever heard. Then he suddenly noticed something. The girl genuinely found the whole thing terrifying. Parker thought her reaction was adorable, though at the same time he found it a little innocent. Just then, someone called out to them, and it turned out to be Professor Gina. She even mentioned that the timing was perfect because she needed their help. She asked Parker and Seika to come to the faculty office. Young asked whether the rumor was actually true, and in the background a girl could be seen walking past. The chubby boy immediately said that the entire story was obviously fake. He had only made it up to see whether they would believe it because, according to him, only an incredibly gullible person would fall for such a story. He even admitted that watching Seika's terrified expression had been hilarious. The blonde instantly called him an idiot. Later that night, the two finally finished helping the teacher. As they walked through the hallway, Seika began feeling increasingly scared. Parker asked whether she was okay because she was shaking quite a bit, and she quickly answered that everything was fine and that she was not afraid of any ghost. Wait, what? I never even mentioned ghosts. I knew that guy would end up scaring you with those stories. She lightly hit him on the shoulder and insisted that ghosts did not exist. The truth, however, was completely different. She was absolutely terrified and could not stop trembling. At that exact moment, piano music began echoing through the building. A gloomy atmosphere immediately spread across the corridor. Parker asked whether that was supposed to be the ghost playing the piano. The girl instantly froze in place like a statue. However, Parker pointed out that it was already late, so it was probably just the music club practicing. In the distance, they noticed a shadow slowly approaching. And to make matters worse, the figure seemed to have glowing eyes. Yeah, that's definitely not helping. Parker asked who was standing over there because the darkness made it impossible to see clearly. Seika immediately assumed it was the ghost, and as the figure drew closer, her fear only intensified. As a result, the poor girl began screaming at the top of her lungs. Instead of running downstairs, she started running upward, and Parker kept telling her that she was heading toward the rooftop, where escaping a ghost would not be any easier. The approaching figure noticed the two students running away in panic, and it turned out to be none other than Professor Gina. She asked why they were behaving like little children. She also wanted to know why they were talking about ghosts in the first place. The poor teacher looked slightly disappointed because she had only wanted to thank them for helping her in the faculty office. It was already well past 7:30 in the evening when Parker opened a door and asked whether Sika was alright. That was when he realized she had completely collapsed. She had suffered an episode caused by her anemia. She was extremely weak and was also crying from the fear she had experienced. Trying to get back on her feet, she asked whether the ghost had finally gone away, and Parker assured her that there was no ghost at all. But at that exact moment, the sound of the piano echoed once more. The melody was undeniably eerie. Parker knew the music was coming from the music room and still refused to believe in ghosts. Meanwhile, Sika was absolutely terrified and could not stop shaking. Jason told our protagonist that this was the perfect chance. He needed to think carefully about what a man should do when a woman was frightened. This was the ideal opportunity to get closer to her. The girl reached for his clothes, completely catching Parker off guard. She was so scared that she could barely speak properly. As she tried to cling to him, she admitted that the entire situation was terrifying her. Parker noticed how close she was and instantly became flustered. Moments like these were exactly when he could strengthen his connection with her. He had heard about this kind of thing before. That psychological effect supposedly worked in a man's favor whenever a woman felt afraid. She continued holding on to him while asking him to calm her down. When he moved a little closer, Sika's expression gradually softened. Trying to lighten the mood with a joke, Parker remarked that if ghosts really existed, this one was at least an exceptionally talented musician. And she admitted that he had a point. At that moment, Sika realized that the piece being played was a waltz. When she was younger, she had taken dance lessons, and unfortunately for her, Guan had always been her dance partner. However, because of her anemia, she eventually had to quit dancing and began attending art classes instead. Even so, she admitted that Guan had been surprisingly skilled on the dance floor. Parker found that hard to imagine since Guan's appearance did not exactly scream professional dancer. Even so, Parker commented that dancing with her must have been difficult. Although it had been a long time since she last danced a waltz, she still remembered some of the steps. And since the friendly ghost was kind enough to provide music for them, Sika came up with an idea. The girl extended her hand toward Parker. He asked why, and she replied that she wanted to dance with him. The two joined hands, and she explained that all he had to do was follow her lead. Unfortunately, Parker was incredibly clumsy and ended up stepping on her foot. He immediately apologized because it must have hurt a lot. She replied that she was still recovering from the kick Young had given her earlier. Then she stretched out her hands once again and said they should try one more time. But when she attempted to spin him around, Parker started turning in the most uncoordinated way imaginable. And before he knew it, he tripped over his own feet and crashed face first onto the floor. Sika burst out laughing and declared that he definitely had no talent for dancing. Some people are born to shine, and others are born to turn a simple waltz into a boss battle. He commented that he was still recovering from his broken nose, making her laugh softly. Then she asked whether he would like to try again. Hold on, are you really sure about that? If he stepped on her foot again, she would probably snap him in half. The boy admitted that he was terrible at dancing, but said he would improve with practice. Then, bowing slightly, he asked her to take his hand. It was an incredibly romantic scene. She remarked that he always seemed to know the right things to say. The girl then promised that she would teach him how to dance properly. At that moment, our dear Parker fell for her even harder, especially because she was looking directly into his eyes. According to Jason, that mysterious melody continued playing throughout the entire night. That strange music was enough to convince some people that the ghost story was real. Others, however, were not convinced at all. For Parker and Seika, the entire incident ended up becoming a romantic memory. The scene then shifts to a later moment. The two were already leaving the school grounds. He asked Seika whether she still attended drawing classes, and she answered that she did and spent a lot of time sketching. He then requested that she draw a muscular man with a mustache someday. Naturally, he promised to pay her for it. Seika replied that realistic drawings were not really her specialty, but she could give it a try. At that moment, Parker felt as though he was genuinely getting to know her better, which had been his goal from the very beginning. He even felt that he should take things a step further. Just then, the girl mentioned that she was going to the restroom for a moment, and he asked whether she would be alright since she had been afraid to walk alone in the dark earlier. However, she replied that she would be completely fine. Wait, wasn't she terrified just a few minutes ago? Not long ago she had been trembling, and she had even run away in panic. But now it seemed as though every trace of fear had vanished. Jason suddenly appeared and commented that Seika's behavior seemed rather suspicious. Jason asked whether Parker remembered the suspension bridge effect they had discussed earlier regarding her fear. But Jason had a theory. Maybe Seika had been pretending to be scared the entire time. And then we see her touching up her makeup in front of a mirror while openly admitting that she does not believe in ghosts. Yeah guys, it looks like that fear might have been an Oscar-worthy performance. Afterward, Professor Gina went to the music room and asked the student there whether she planned to go home or stay and play piano all night. Irara replied that she only wanted to play one more song because she did not have a piano at home. The teacher commented that she had not heard anything unusual, only a few distant voices. Irara then agreed and said she would head home. And that brings us to the end of the story about the boy who saw girls as nothing more than rocks. If you made it all the way here, thank you very much. You are a true supporter of the channel. Consider becoming a channel member. It is very affordable, and you will be able to watch new videos before everyone else. There are also several exclusive videos available for members. If you would like me to cover the second part, leave a comment saying Rock Boy. If we reach the goal that has been set, I will bring the continuation as quickly as possible. It is extremely important that you leave a comment and share this video with your friends. And don't forget to check whether you're already subscribed to the channel. I always try to bring continuations for you guys, but that can only happen if the first part performs well. So if this video receives very few views, it will be difficult to continue the series. I will leave 2 recommended videos from the channel that I am confident you will enjoy. So I'll see you over there. And that's all for today. Thank you very much, and until next time everyone.